Across the UK, on DAB, online and on your smart speaker, this is Times Radio.
Well, the front page of the Times this morning has the details of the deal that we've just been discussing with George. The Prime Minister strikes submarine deal to face new threat. And we'll be going live to Sydney in about 10 minutes' time. But they say 1-0 Lineker. The BBC's been criticised as Match of the Day star returns, and that story's on the front page of many of the papers. The Guardian says BBC bosses face pressure over the U-turn over Gary Lineker. The Daily Telegraph talk about what might be happening for pensions. Of course, it's the budget tomorrow. They say Jeremy Hunt is preparing to boost the tax-free allowance for pensions by more than £500,000 as he battles the wave of early retirement that has squeezed growth. The Daily Mail says it's a slap in the face for BBC licence payers as they've let Gary Lineker back on the airwaves. And that's on so many of the pages. Something different, though, on the Mirror. And they've got the story of Gary Glitter, last night recalled to prison for breaching bail conditions. That's just a month after his release. Well, let's look at some of these stories in a little bit more detail. Andrew Eborn, barrister, broadcaster and Futurist, joins me on the line. Andrew, very good morning.
A very good morning from Cannes this week, which is always a joy.
I know, you're sort of making me the envy. Last week, Rome. Today, Cannes. It sounds wonderful. The Daily Star, Andrew, says it's 1-0 to the Crisps Sailmans. Is that right?
I think it probably is. I think it's 1-0 to Gary Lineker and BBC credibility getting 0 points. It is indeed a slap in the face. And what an extraordinary story. It's dominated the headlines forever. Basically pushing back the thing he was talking about in the first place to the small print almost. So an extraordinary story, and it raised all sorts of questions. It brought back into sharp focus the question about Richard Sharp, the BBC chair, who helped facilitate a loan for Boris Johnson. That's obviously being looked at by the appointment watchdog, and so on and so forth. But Gary's back on air. There are apparently no restrictions in terms of what he's allowed to do. But the BBC...
Well, he's got to currently follow the guidelines that are in place while they review them. Of course, Gary Lineker went on Twitter straight away and raised some of his opinions, but the BBC have said they're okay. The question mark is, do you think the BBC overstepped the mark the first time when they pulled him off the air?
Well, clearly, you're either going to lose this battle when lots of your other presenters turn around and say, we're going to boycott Match of the Day, and so many people in broadcast offered to fill the slot for Gary, together with my good friend Pat Sharp, who suffered a similar fate. The reality is this, is that Gary's a freelancer. It calls into all sorts of questions about freedom of speech and what the BBC presenters can or cannot say, and the difference between a news journalist and one who's a general commentator. It wasn't as though he was sort of announcing the football results, Bognor Regis 7, Man United 5, and by the way, here's my views on the immigration policy. He did this to an off-air. It was a tweet which he put originally, which were his views, with a very unfortunate comparison to 1930s Germany, which everybody sort of latched onto. It wasn't talking about, as some people said, about the Holocaust, because that was obviously in the 40s, but it was nevertheless unfortunate. But it did, and lots of newspapers said, well, hang about, we pay the licence fee, and therefore, basically, we don't want commentators commenting on anything other than what they're engaged to comment on.
We'll see how they review the guidelines. It's been so controversial. I know that you might be listening this morning thinking what Andrew's saying is outrageous. Well, let me know if that's you. You can text me 87222, start your message with the word Times. Look, a boost for pensions, front page of the Daily Telegraph, Andrew. We're going to hear a lot more detail tomorrow in the budget. The Chancellor's got to do something to try and persuade people out of early retirement.
Oh, you're absolutely right. It's removing the disincentive to work. What's happening is this is the narrative about getting people off the golf course. And what it is, at the moment, there is a cap on the amount that you can put into your pension of 1 million, strange figures, £1,073,100. There's talk about this going up to 1.8 million, basically to boost more people to be incentivised to get working. And in addition to that, they're going to raise the annual allowance they're talking about raising the annual allowance from 40,000 to 60,000. And it's an interesting one because they've been talking about sort of getting people back to work, getting the over 50s, incentivising them. And this is one of those incentives.
Front page of the Mirror. Well, obviously, we'll get more details on the budget and the spending tomorrow, and I do like that sort of demand to make it not boring. We'll promise to do that here. The Mirror talking about Gary Glitter. Last night recalled to prison for breaching bail conditions. You know, this is just a month after being released. The source said it's clear Glitter has no remorse for his crimes. What do you make of this?
Well, this was a 16-year sentence. What happened under the old rules, you basically come out on what's called licence after half of that time. And basically during that time, they had to stick to certain conditions. It sounds as though it was the Sun who were instrumental in basically filming Gary Glitter, accessing what's called the dark web, where you get a lot of these illegal images and so on and so forth. So they filmed him. So he's basically breached the terms of his license 1 month after release, and therefore he's going back to serve the rest of his time.
And there'll be more details on that and the repercussions as well. Inside the papers, lots of them are enjoying sort of looking at how trends change over time. Farewell to the 90s. Alcopops and CDs are out of the UK's shopping basket. We have this sort of measure of inflation. What's in our average shop? And clearly CDs have fallen out of fashion somewhat. They've been replaced by other things in terms of changing and monitoring our spending, haven't they? For things like electric scooters, frozen berries. I don't know if you ever bought an alcopop, but they're out of the basket.
It's quite extraordinary, but you're right. So these are the measures. It's the list of items that basically add together, you work out what inflation might be, and the list has indeed CDs and are off the charts, and so are indeed alcopops. They're now replaced by ebikes, frozen berries, and video doorbells. Can you believe? So these are the new items. These are what people, the great British public, are spending their money on, and it's basically working out what sort of increase there might be with those items. And as a result, they basically will give an indication about what inflation might be.
Yeah, 5 years ago, apparently gym leggings came in. I remember talking about that at the time, and so did quiche, while bottled lager sold in nightclubs and pork pies were removed. And in 2013, so 10 years ago, e-books and blueberries were in, and also filled rolls sold in pubs and round lettuces were out. So it's interesting to sort of track the trends and the changes.
Well, it's certainly true the lettuce is out, but we won't go down there.
No, please no. In the FT today, there's reporting more than 60% of young American men are single. That does sound surprising.
It is incredible. All the young dudes, as they would say, it's between the age of 18 and 29. And they're saying about 60% of males, more than 60% of males, they choose to be single. It happens to be their second choice. and about 30+% of females are now single. So it's an interesting decline in those people choosing to basically live the single life. And you have to work out how many people actually made that choice and whether it really matters. Society's always dictated that you have to pair up with people. I think there are lots of people who are very happy living life singly. And I think that's what you need to break the statistics down a little bit further.
But do they give any sort of theories as to why there's been an increase in singleness?
I think it's been difficult during the pandemic about people pairing up, because obviously everything's been sort of online or all Zoomed, as they say. But in terms of what it might be, I mean, people not being able to meet people in the usual sort of way, but also people are working longer hours. They're spending more time on screen as opposed to meeting people in person. But it really is, as I say, further analysis needs to be done as to why this might be and what it might mean for the future.
Finally, it's a slightly unsavoury story that we'll end on. The Cheltenham Festival begins today, and the Times have got some of the interesting tactics that are being deployed by the council to stop people, particularly men, definitely men, I'm afraid, for relieving themselves in public rather than finding a bathroom. What are they doing, Andrew?
Well, it's the war on we, as they've called it. It's the Cheltenham National Hunt Festival. It starts 65,000 visitors due today. 58,000 tomorrow and 68,500 on Friday. What it is councillors in Gloucestershire town have put a poster up which depicts a man and a woman urinating. And they basically say, have fun this race, but remember our town is not your toilet. And what they've done is there was a big problem last year, even though they had these pop-up loos, is that people were basically weeing in the streets. So they've also now got this what's called hydrophobic paint. And what this does, it causes liquid, whatever that might be, to return in the direction of its source. So this hydrophobic paint is going to be all over the relevant area in an attempt to prevent people doing this very antisocial act.
And they've said this year we've offered this paint to businesses and residents to paint on their properties. I'm sure the prospect of wet trousers will make people think twice, even if they think they won't be caught and fined. Well, they may reveal themselves by looking rather wetter than they started if they choose to urinate in public rather than in the bathroom. Andrew, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to go through the papers. Enjoy France. It's utterly miserable weather here, as per normal over the last few days, so stay warm. Look, digital subscribers to The Times can get 2 for 1 on Everyman tickets on Wednesday evening. So potentially, maybe if the Oscars chat yesterday tickled your fancy and you want to go to the big screen, if you're free tomorrow night, why not catch one of those films? That is just one of the fantastic offers available to Times Plus subscribers as one of the benefits of your digital subscription. Just head to the Times Plus members loyalty area on the website or app. Up next, we go to Sydney.
Across the UK, on DAB, online and on your smart speaker. This is Times Radio Early Breakfast.